right, here we are. Welcome to the pit. I have Chief Master Sergeant retired Kevin Ott here, and I'm so excited to be doing this interview slash podcast. So Chief Ott, can you please tell us about yourself for those who do not know who you are?
Sure. My name's Kevin. Born and raised in the great state of Indiana, so I'm a Hoosier. And celebrating the Indiana University football team finally being able to play football. Very surprising there. Joined the Air Force in 1982. Served total of 30 years on active duty. Then I did 10 years as a civil servant. So 40 years in the Air Force. It was never my dream or my goal or to join the Air Force. Like many people, you join because of circumstances. My circumstance was dropping out of college, and I joined the Air Force again to do 4 years. Ended up enjoying it. Ended up experiences, seeing and doing things I never imagined I ever would have, and ended up sticking around till I couldn't stick around any longer.
Thank you so much for your service. That is a long, long, long time.
You didn't have to say long, long, long. You just want
Long.
okay.
I
So,
was born in '88.
oh, 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 ouch.
It's I mean, I say long in the best sense because a lot of people, I mean, even if people do give 4 years, giving 40, that's something that,
Yeah, I surprised myself when I think about that.
it's a long time.
Yeah.
So since this platform is powered by AFSA and you are like gold in the AFSA world, for those who don't know, which is the Air Force Sergeants Association, what's your AFSA story?
My AFSA story is kind of like my Air Force story. Wasn't something I ever, imagined or planned or took charge right away, so to speak. 1984, 1985, maybe I got a free membership, either as Airman of the Year in 1984. I know that's surprising, but I was a sharp airman at one time. Or when I became a E4 Buck Sergeant in 1985. I remember getting a free membership and got the Sergeant's Magazine. It was called Sergeant's Magazine then. Now it's the AFSA magazine. I always understood and appreciated being involved in the legislative world. My dad was a World War II veteran, and he basically said, paraphrasing a little bit, anybody can sit around and complain about stuff, but if you're not willing to do anything, then all you're doing is just, complaining, whining, whatever you want to call it. Dropped out of membership, renewed once in a while, for probably 10, 15 years or so. Never attended a meeting. I don't remember back then if there even was a chapter where I was at. Certainly there was no email back in the dark ages. So you didn't know what was going on necessarily. But I knew I always got that Sergeant's Magazine and always felt confident or felt comforted in knowing that there were people out there fighting for our benefits, our earned benefits. I ended up about the late 90s becoming a life member. Pretty much, I figured at the 17-year mark or whatever I was on active duty, I'm going to make it a career. So I better start taking care of myself in that regards as far as professional membership. Still didn't go to any meetings or anything. Then I found myself at Fort Meade, Maryland, at the National Security Agency in the 70th Intelligence Support Squadron. And I saw an email probably about AFSA having a chapter meeting. And I thought, I've never been to a meeting. I'm an AFSA member. Maybe I should go, particularly as I'm a Chief Master Sergeant. So I went to that first meeting. The chapter met then over in the chapel activities center or one of the small rooms off of the one of the chapels on Fort Meade. And I want to say that first meeting, there was 4 or 5 people there, including our mutual friend, Mr. Mark Hamilton, named Master Sergeant Mark Hamilton. And I went to that first meeting and I was like, wow, this little group of people is doing great things at Fort Meade area. And I started going to every monthly meeting. I don't remember ever sending out an email to my squadron or anything, or even telling people that they needed to go. But somehow, out of I guess sheer curiosity or something else, word got out that there was a chief that was at this AFSA meeting, and people started coming to the meetings. And within about 6 months or so, we outgrew that little room. We ended up meeting monthly over at the Airman Leadership School. I'm not sure where it's located at now, but the old Airman Leadership School building at Fort Meade. And we started having 25, 30 people at a chapter meeting. And I think as a senior leader, as I was, people will follow you out of sheer curiosity, out of whatever the reason they're gonna follow the chief, so to speak. And that little chapter, I mean, really took off, and did some fantastic things in the area around Fort Meade and in the greater DMV area, DC, Maryland, Virginia. And then ended up here back at Ellsworth Air Force Base, Chapter 951. Became the legislative trustee for a few years, became the Division 3 trustee, legislative trustee, got involved with a lot of things, particularly basic allowance for housing. That kind of was the thing that made me famous, so to speak. And then eventually became elected as the Division 3 president, which I served 3 terms, total of 6 years, up until this past year, where I stepped down as president. Longtime vice president, longtime friend of mine, Vice President Dave Bamberg, stepped up, become the new Division 3 president. And I just continue being an AFSA advocate, telling people, you know, there's a great organization doing great things. Most of it's behind the scenes. Most of it is things you'll never see, an AFSA banner out in front saying, we did this. But we did. We did that as an organization.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So now we're going to transition to how do you define success and failure? And then it's going to be a two-part question. So what has failure, so for the part of failure, taught you that success never could?
Sure. Success, I mean, I know there's a textbook definition and what they teach you in PME, accomplishing a goal or whatever, blah, 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 blah. I mean, there's daily success. There's little successes every day that you have. People that are my Facebook friends typically see success as something that I have in front of me on a plate for a meal that day that either I cooked or I went out and ordered. So got those little successes every day. Then you start looking at the bigger things, projects that you have, career goals. And again, like I said about being in the Air Force, was never a dream or a goal. It was just something that I did, and I guess I became. Much like being a chief. If you told me at any time during my career that you're going to be a chief master sergeant someday, I probably would have laughed at you and said, that person's an idiot or whatever. So it never was, that driven to that particular goal. But as you go through successes and different things, I think success takes time. Success takes patience and perseverance. We all make plans. And I don't think any plan that we've ever made or any plan that a leadership team or a group has developed ever works out as it was planned. Because things happen. You can't predict every little change or every little thing that happens along the way. So success is a series of little steps and things. And a lot of times you hit a roadblock, which could be considered a failure, or it can be considered a challenge, or it could be considered whatever you want to call it. But you're grinding, you're making those little improvements, you're doing things incrementally, and eventually you'll reach the destination point or the goal. What failure taught me, and I had a lot. I had many in my career where things I wanted to do didn't work out. The Air Force had another plan for me, and at the time, of course, you're just like you're disappointed, you're upset, you're peeved, or another word that starts with the letter P, because the Air Force didn't let you do what you wanted to do. And of course, in looking back in history, I look back to that particular time, whether it was not being selected to become a first sergeant, or an assignment I didn't get, or TDY I didn't get to go on, or whatever. And I look at that and I say, well, from that point, my career went in this direction. Maybe if I had made that or gotten that thing I wanted here, my career might have gone, in a flat line or something like that. You never know. So I think when you get a failure, and I know there's first attempt in learning or whatever is one of the acronyms to make him up with fail. And when you fall down 5 times, you get up six or whatever it is. You're just gonna move on. You're gonna make some adjustments, and when you're leading a team, and maybe you have a failure as your team or a setback, I think one of the things that I learned was the importance of communicating. Not everybody necessarily shares your vision. They're happy the way things are, or where you want to go necessarily is not where they want to go. But if you've got that vision and you're leading the team, the importance of sharing that vision, getting buy-in, I think is what they call it nowadays. Is very very important. And failure is a failure is a momentary thing, I think. Success is still going to be there. It may not have even been the success that you wanted, or you originally thought. I want to do X, Y, or Z, and that didn't happen. But you ended up doing another thing which is even better for you. um, like I said, in my career of assignments and different things, I don't know, half a dozen failures that I can remember. It's probably even more. But each one was an opportunity then to do something different. And I think it was always interesting, and it even still is today, when people see something in you that you don't see in yourself, and you wonder sometimes, "Well, what are you talking about?
Right.
That's not, I can't do that." Um, public speaking, as an example, was something I never would have ever done. And it's one of my favorite things to do now, maybe because I'm old and, hey, people listen to me, I'll keep talking. Um, but, the success and failure thing, I think we get twisted around the axle so much. Not everything's going to be a success. One of my favorite movies was Apollo 13. I remember when Apollo 13 actually happened. I was alive then, and of age to remember things. And at the end of the movie, the voiceover from Tom Hanks as Jim Lovell says, that we were a successful failure. We failed in our goal to land on the moon, but we succeeded in being able to come back alive. And when you think of that, you talk about a plan and success. The scene where they took the two different systems from the two different space vehicles and made them work together with just the stuff they had on hand. They tore the cover off their plan. I mean, that was very symbolic too. It's like, we're not going to do this anymore. We will tear the cover off, but we're going to use that and some duct tape to make this all work together. Very, very, very cool. Very, very, very interesting.
Agreed. I think failure, it gives you like the fuel to appreciate the successes. Like kind of like when it's sunny outside. Like if it was always sunny,
Right.
like with the a little bit of rain makes you appreciate the sun.
Right. We've had like 2 full days of very high winds out here in South Dakota. So be happy when the wind stops blowing.
How cold is it? It sound South Dakota sound cold.
It sounds cold, but it's really not. And here in Rapid City is actually referred to as the banana belt of the Dakotas. So we have much better weather than they have on the eastern side of the state.
Okay.
And we'll get our snow. But I've lived in places that had hurricanes and typhoons, and every place has got something.
Mhm.
I'll take snow over hurricane any day.
Hear that. All right. What leadership lesson took you the longest to learn?
Delegation.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about it.
And when I say that, it's not that, giving you the task to perform, but letting you perform the task the way you think it would work out better. Um, Obviously, you can't delegate fully, 'cause then you're just like dumping it on somebody. You've got, the checkups on the different points and things. And if you're running into any problems, come back and talk, whatever it could be. But it was amazing when I finally figured that out as a master sergeant. I would assign a big goal or a big task to my team when I was at Keesler as an instructor. And then they were doing it a little bit different than I would have done it. They zigged when I would have zagged. Um, and I was like, wow, I never thought of that. So you're learning as well when you're a leader and you delegate. You should be learning then too. There's more than one way to peel a banana. I guess actually the right way is to peel it from not the top part but the other part. I don't know.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
saw that on a
definitely.
YouTube video. I'm like, okay, whatever. And to let people, to give them the authority, give them the response, to give them responsibility, but still maintaining ownership. When you delegate. Um, and I always say, very few things come out from the top tier of leadership that are perfect. As the action people take over, be it the officer corps, the senior NCOs, the NCOs, the airmen, they're going to make it work to what leadership wanted. And at the end of the day, leadership should be surprised at the innovation, at the work of those that actually got it done. I was blessed to be part uh, of many different teams in the Air Force that did things that I think other people thought was impossible, and I probably we thought it was impossible at the time too, because you never know what you're really capable of. But being able to delegate a task to an individual or a group of people was the biggest thing that I had to learn, and I'm sure there's a book on it or many books on it. But it's just kind of one of those things that I think again, because I'm ultimately responsible. And well, if I'm not there every minute of the day, making sure, they do this and they do that, as I would do it, you know, it, I know they call it micromanaging too. But at the same time, you've got to be there. You got to be present. You got to check up on the team, you know. And just to be there, but to put the trust in your people, because you've trained them. You might not have hired them because usually we don't hire people; we get the people that are signed. But you've trained them, you've talked to them, you've learned about them, strengths and weaknesses. Everybody's got strengths, everybody's got weaknesses, and obviously you want to play to the strengths. At the same time, you want to be able to develop the weak areas that they have, but at the end of the day, sometimes those weak areas are still weak areas because there's just certain things, that a person just cannot do because it's just not in their job jar, in their DNA.
Yeah. Delegation is hard, but that's a good one. And then letting your team or your team member delegating something to them, it also helps with talent management because then you can either figure out that they don't know how to do something and try to teach them or delegate them, different. Yep. So it also goes into talent management. That's a good one.
And I think the Air Force, and we've always been this way. It's not a new thing. PME, we look at it as Well, they finished ALS. Now they're ready to be a supervisor. No, they're not.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, um, NCO Academy, senior NCO Academy. I was in I think the second group or the second gathering of chiefs to go through the uh, Chiefs Leadership course. It was called
Mhm.
then. It's called the Chief Leadership Academy now, or something like that. And I was in like the second class of that as a newly selected chief, a senior master sergeant at the time. And even at that time, a lot of us, and probably myself too, to some extent, what are you going to teach me? I've been in 20 years. What are you going to teach me? I know everything. And the fact of the matter is, no one knows everything. You should be learning. You learn something every day. It may not be dramatic. At the end of the day, you may not even realize you learned something. But you should be learning something every day. And I think that's one of the great things about the Air Force, about the military, in the fact that the team that you work with are usually people you would never have met in otherwise in life, coming from different states, coming from different countries, different backgrounds, different experiences, and then you all come together as this productive team, and that's a great thing when you see it happen. And I think we've all been a part of that great team. At the same time, we've probably been part of a team that was not great.
Mhm. Yep. So you run the Ask the Chiefs page, which is a great page.
I'm
Um,
one of those. I'm one of the people that runs it. I'm not the only one.
so have you thought about writing a book, or have you?
I have not. Um, Actually, I've had people that have told me I should write a book. Um, when I was working as a GS employee back in the squadron, um, I'd be up in the front office area with my coffee cup, telling stories and different things. And it's amazing when you think of different events that you had and how it relates to something that's happening today. And I shared a whole bunch of stories with multiple commanders and any airman that was within earshot that chose to listen. And they're all. I think most of them are funny,
You are.
and some of them I would tell a story, and my commander would say, "Oh, you couldn't do that today." And I said, "Well, yeah, you're probably right, but at the same time, we probably couldn't have done it then either. But we did it, and things not criminal activities or nothing like that, but just you said that." I says, "Well, yeah, I said that, or I did that, or whatever." There was moments I had where I did something, and then I'm like, "Ooh, wow, I can't believe I did that." You know, uh, and paid the price on a couple things. Nothing to the big extent, but you get the old letter of something out there. No one is perfect, and then I think even when I was in the chair as the chief, um, talking with some of the airmen and some of the NCOs, and I think my whole time as a senior NCO, if I gave out two letters of counseling, I think I would be over the actual number I gave out. I don't recall it. I did a lot of talks. I did a lot of talking to folks, and I was big on being proactive. Mm, I'm amazed today when I hear so many senior NCOs. I'm putting in 14 to 16-hour days, and I'm like, really, really? I don't. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I was just fortunate that I had just a super bunch of people. I don't know, but I'm like, I just like, I don't, I'm not buying that. Um, I would do a lot of things up front, being proactive. I used to do monthly chief chats when I was the chief in the squadrons. Um, and I would teach. I taught a writing class at Fort Meade as an example. I get to Fort Meade and Intel. I'm not an Intel person by trade. I'm communications. So I get into the NSA, and I was They did a murder board, which I hate. I hate murder boards. Um, I would usually let my commander do one when the new commander came on board. Then I would talk to them about it afterwards. I said, "Sir, we just wasted 4 hours of our time. We got through 2 packages out of 10. I mean, what do you think?" I said, "Let me run it, sir," and it worked out well. But anyway, I'm at Fort Meade, and the first murder board I went to was for a package for, I don't know, Airman of the Year, NCO of the Year, whatever it was. And they put it up on the big screen, and I'm just reading this thing, and I'm just totally lost. This was even when we still used words on EPRs, before they got totally all abbreviated and all the hokum that was going on towards the end there. But I had no idea what this was. And I had taught some reading or writing stuff earlier as a senior master sergeant back in my unit. But now I'm the new chief. I am a new chief. So I started teaching this thing for the 70th Intelligence Support Squadron at Fort Meade. And I went up to the wing headquarters one day to do something. Actually, the command chief was in. So I introduced myself to him. "Oh, how you doing? Whatever." And I told him what I was doing. And he says, "Nope." And I started going into defensive mode. I probably clenched my fists. He said, "Nope, I don't want you to be doing that." And I'm just like, before I could ask the why question, he goes, "I want you to do it for the entire wing. Mm. We all need this, not just your squadron." "Oh, okay, chief." I'm a new guy. I don't want to overstep my bounds. So I did that class every month for the 2 years I was at Fort Meade. And it was a 3 hour, whatever it was. It was pretty long. But I was amazed at the audience I got, because it went out across the whole NSA campus. I had, it was Air Force centric, but I had leaders from all the other services that were at the NSA sitting in this to learn how to write Air Force write. Because Air Force writes differently than the other services did. And I had high ranking GSs. I had, sergeant majors sitting in there. I had all these people every day, every month for the 2 years I was at Fort Meade. And later, you talk about making an impact or whatever. A couple of the folks that were in that would sit in my session there. I think she was a tech sergeant then. Maybe I just put on master. Later, she made chief, and we reconnected a little bit on Facebook. And she said to me, she says, "I took that writing thing that you used to do at Fort Meade, and I was doing it at XYZ base or whatever. And, I learned so much from you. It helped me become a chief." And I'm just like, "Oh, okay, thanks." But to write a book or something, I don't, I don't, I don't know if I could come up with enough things. And in all honesty,
And we need to hear your.
what's that?
I said, just tell your story. We need to hear it, and it could
Yeah,
be a book of little stories.
it would
But
be a book of little stories. Yeah,
in the digital age, we can go Google and find an interview,
yeah.
but we need it. And I
And
learned
and
some stories.
and like I said, there were so many things that I encountered and did that I think when I was telling the stories again around the squadron, it wasn't like special because it was just something I did. But they were like, "Well, that was so neat and cool," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." I didn't. And there were some aha moments. Um, there were some things I did that I can't believe I did. Um, we were doing a big career field merger when I was at Keesler, and I was the assistant element chief for the schoolhouse. And we had a big, it's called UNTW then, something training workshop. I think the name is different now, where all the functional commands, all the functional chiefs got together from all the MAGCOMs and decided training stuff and all that kind of stuff. So we were briefing this new course outline. We were tasked to develop this whole new course. And we put a lot of time and effort into this course. And we had, listed all the new furniture we would need and knew this and knew that to modernize the classrooms, because our classrooms were terrible. We still had the overhead transparency things that you would write on backwards and lay on a thing and it would show up on the wall. I think we're the only ones in the world that still use those. But anyway, we had, all this new technology and things we wanted to bring in the classroom. And we were briefing it to the chiefs. Again, I was number two, so I was just sitting off to the side. I wasn't the briefer. And the career field manager, he says, "Well, do you have computers now to teach?" And I was like, "Well, no, chief, we do this overhead trip." He said, "Well, I'm not buying you new computers. Take it off the list." Whittle it away. Basically, it was a $3 million design. Whittled it down to $600,000. So no new furniture, no new, and we had just crap. We had terrible stuff, and I was a tech sergeant. I was really mad. I mean, when I used to get mad, I would just get beet red, and I knew my facial temperature was probably 120 degrees. I was so hot, and I got up to the front of the room, and of course we had borrowed a computer with a projector for the chief to run his meeting, right? So he said, I'm not going to buy you computers to teach with. But of course, he's using the computer for his meeting. So I'm a tech sergeant. I know everything. So I'm going to make a point. So I go up to the front of the room. And again, there's 15, 20 chief master sergeants, and I'm a tech sergeant. So I go up to the front of the room. I put the lens cap cover on the projector. So the screen went black. My mind, this is my plan. I'm going to wheel this thing out of the room, and I'm going to say, Chief, if you don't think we need computers to teach with, I don't think you need a computer to run your meeting. That's what I was going to say, right? Well, I put the lens cap on and the screen went black, and I'm shaking. I'm red. I'm just shaking. I'm just and when the screen went black, the chief went, "Oh, okay, all right. Let's get back on track, guys. Thank you, Sergeant." I took the cover off and I sat back down. It was kind of like it served a purpose to get everybody stop yammering and let's get back on track. So I sat down. I'm just shaking. And we took a break later that day, and my supervisor was senior master sergeant, later made chief, senior master sergeant. He goes, KO. He says, "What were you doing up there?" And I told him what I was going to do. That I was going to turn this thing off and wheel it out of the room and say, "Chief, blah 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 blah." And he goes, "Oh my God." I go, "Yeah. Oh my God." And he goes, "What stopped you?" I said, "Well, I think I got a sign from above that told me not to do that because I stopped midstream." And, if I had done that, oh my God, I think Tech Sergeant Ott would have been retiring shortly thereafter. Um, but, looking, I mean, and at that time, again, as a tech sergeant, I thought I knew everything. And of course I didn't. Guess what? As a chief, I didn't know everything either. But I could fake it a little bit better, I think. But you just get in those situations, and again, it's very easy for passion to take over, and we see that a lot now on the social media and different things that people are passionate about something, and sometimes your passion blinds you to reality, blinds you to things. But what I didn't know at the time, and this was the end of the story here, is that the chief only had $679,000 to spend on this new course. But he never told us that. So we designed this perfect course, which was $2 million, whatever. It was in the millions. Had new furniture in all the classrooms, all this technology, smart boards, and all this kind of stuff. We didn't even know what it was at the time. We were still using dry erase markers on a whiteboard, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, we got $679,000. But now I had a list of all these things that were unfunded requirements. So we had spelled out this entire course. And over the next 6 months, because I put on master sergeant and I became the course supervisor. The next 6 months, then I had an unfunded list, and I would get calls or emails almost every day. "This is Captain So and So at this squadron. I heard you need some money down at Keesler. We got $12,000 that we can. What do you need for 12,000?" And I would tell them off my spreadsheet what I needed for 12,000. And in 6 months' time, we got the remaining 1.8, whatever it was, millions of dollars, and we ended up building this course, which was the flagship course at the time for the Air Force. and we did a lot of great things out of that course. Um, but at that moment in time, and then the amount of work we put in, that was the hardest I ever worked in the Air Force, really. You wouldn't think so, being a tech school instructor, but going in at 3 or 4 in the morning and literally leaving at 6 p.m. every day for about 6 months.
That took a lot of courage. A lot of courage to think about if you was gonna go up there and do that,
Courage and stupidity.
right? But you had the self control to not, and then you ended up getting all of the supplies
It
anyway.
was it was it was a moment that woo, yeah, I couldn't believe I did that.
Good stuff. All right, I'm gonna read something once I get my phone open. All right. So, ego is defined as a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. Could you explain like how you feel when I read that statement, like the fine balance of ego, like too much or too little?
Right. Everybody has an ego. Everybody does. If they don't, they're not alive. So don't say, so and so's egotistical and no, I'm not. Everybody has an ego to a certain level. Um, do you have your name thing on the front of your desk? Staff sergeant so and so, tech sergeant so and so. Do you have your name on the office door? Little things like that. You have an ego. But what does happen, and I call it the velvet rope syndrome. Like when you go to a big fancy banquet or a fancy restaurant or something, there's a velvet rope and the guy out front with the names and people, and you're not on the list. As you move up in rank, when you hit chief master sergeant, ego the ego comes out in a lot of people in a very, very bad way. And normally they end up on the cover of the Air Force Times, not in a good way. If your name's not David Wolf, you really should not be on the cover of the Air Force Times, as a chief master sergeant. Um, Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. And my example I have for me personally, when I get to Ellsworth as a chief, I've been a chief for 4 years already by then. This is my last assignment to come here at Ellsworth. And I in process and I go to you go through the in processing stations and medicals there and they take your records and they do whatever and they sign you up for your first appointment, whatever. And oh, chief, well, as a chief, you're going to be in flight medicine. All right. Oh, okay. I mean, all right, whatever. I'm just going with the process, no big deal. And then I have my first appointment to go see the flight surgeon for that was my PHA or my initial thing or whatever. And I go in and to see the flight surgeon, and I had never seen a flight surgeon before in my career. So, the flight surgeon, I'm thinking it's going to be like, wow, this super doctor or whatever, right? Just another person, another doctor. Uh, just I think the only difference was she's wearing a flight suit rather than OCPs or BDUs then or ABUs, whatever we wore then. ABUs, I guess they were called. And then, what got me was she didn't really notice me as a person. I go in. My medical record was, chief master sergeant thickness. It was not a thin one. It was a medium thick. I've seen guys with 2 or 3 folders. I had like one, about that thick though. And for some reason, my record was still coded as staff sergeant. They couldn't ever get it between deers and all the. It still said staff sergeant. No big deal to me. But it was always funny when I'd be in the waiting room for something for medical, like, staff sergeant not, and I'd stand up. Oh, chief, we're so sorry. I said, don't worry about it. That's okay. I get the same Motrin everybody else gets. It doesn't really matter. But the flight surgeon never noticed me as a person. She asked, are you in flying status? I said, no. Are you in PRP? I says, no. She says, why are you in flight medicine? I says, that's where they send me. I don't know. Didn't really look up to see this guy's 48 years old. Didn't notice he's got a lot of stripes over here. Oh, he's a chief. That's why he's here. So I was like, nah, she didn't see me as a patient or as a person. Just like, why are you here? And that bothered me. So I went right away to the counter, patient admin, whatever the counter was labeled. And I said, I want to switch out of flight medicine into family practice. Oh, you're a chief. I said, yeah, I know that. Thank you. I know I'm a chief. Well, chiefs are, I said, no, I'm not in that. Take me out of flight medicine. Put me in family practice. So where's my wife and my son go? Family practice. So I'm going there too. Where do my airmen go? Family practice. I'm going there too. Because I think you can get so isolated in the velvet rope, special VIP treatment that leaders do get. Some of it maybe is warranted. I love the parking spot by the commissary. I use it all the time. I use the spot at the DFAC. I use the spot at the NCO club at the club parking spot. But here I am. I said I don't need a special doctor. I don't need this. So I got put back into family practice with everybody else. But I'd be sitting there in the family practice waiting area, and my peers would come walking by, going to flight medicine. Hey, KO, what are you doing over here? He says, I go to flight medicine. And it's like, well, why? And I would usually say it in a loud enough voice that it kind of carried, if it's good enough for my family and my airmen, it's good enough for me. And they go, oh, okay, whatever. And I thought, if my airmen are having to wait past their appointment time, I don't realize that if I go to flight medicine and I get seen within 2 minutes. I need to see what my airmen go through. Because you get to the point where it's like, oh, I don't get that treatment. Oh, of course you don't, Chief. Whatever you call up or you just say, oh, this is Chief, boom, you get instant treatment. And you think every airman gets that as well, and they don't. But you get isolated into that cocoon, and you don't even realize you're out of touch. So I think the ego, and ego feeds into that too. When I went to the Chiefs course way back when, one of the lessons that was given, and it did not sit well with everybody. We were in the big auditorium there at the Senior NCO Academy. We used to call it the Coma Dome back then. I'm not sure if they still call it that or not, but we did back in the day. And the lesson was from the command chief at Maxwell, and basically it was the personal behavior speech. We see a lot of the senior leaders don't do well in their personal life. Sexual harassment, sexual assault, that kind of stuff. And the speech he gave out was blah blah blah. It was straight to the point. And I was sitting more towards the back of the group there, 250, 200 of us, whatever, new chiefs. And I could see the body language of some of the folks who were like, know, talk to me that way. I was like, you probably need to hear that lesson, because you see it all too often now. The removal for loss of confidence. It's like, what does that mean? Loss of confidence, and I think, I know it gets into, salaciousness and different things, but, if somebody did something
Tell it.
and it was to the level that, yeah, there's enough evidence, there's witnesses, and yeah, I'm firing you from your position as whatever it is. Don't just walk out the door quietly, because that behavior continues on. Because people think, again, I'm not going to get caught. I'm the whatever I am. It's like, no, I mean, it's wrong for one thing. Obviously, it's illegal for another, and you need to be held accountable. And I think we miss that accountability sometimes when leaders do bad. Way back when, I was chief here at Ellsworth, and I was sitting in as MSG MSG chief, MSG superintendent, whatever they called it back then. And we had the MSG staff meeting, and DUIs was a subject. It's always a subject, DUIs. And the MSG commander said, the next DUI and MSG, they're going to be out at the main gate in service dress, updating the board, the number of days since the last DUI. They're going to be out there in service dress, blah, 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 blah. And all the commanders are taking notes and things. Get done, go back to our offices, and I walked in the commander's office. I said, "Sir, you got a second?" "Yeah, Chief, what's up?" I said, "Definitely, I understand the whole DUI thing and what we're doing and everything, but I said, I don't think it's right to make the service dress uniform a form of punishment. Go out and change the sign. I got it. The sign's effective or ineffective, that's always a subject of debate. But to go out there and make somebody put on a service dress uniform to do this, you're belittling this uniform. This is a uniform of pride. It's not a uniform of punishment." And he stopped and he looked at me. He goes, "Oh, I never thought of it that way, Chief. I said, sir, it's still your decision, and I'll salute it and follow whatever you want to do. But I don't think it's right." And he did change that to uniform of the day. But I said, I don't, we shouldn't make this uniform a form of punishment.
I do have a question. So when you switched to family medicine, the doctor did that doctor see you as human? Like, was the treatment better compared to flight medicine?
Yeah, it was. It was. And we all have our stories about healthcare. We all have our stories about military healthcare. But I will say overall, and um, our son was born in a military hospital in Yongsan in Korea. My wife still goes to the doctor on base. I'm getting ready to switch over here this year to the next age group where I can't be seen on base anymore. But you know, we all expect again, I think, to go in and get an instantaneous treatment and diagnosis. But I think overall the care we receive is good, but a lot of delegation, I'll use that word again, of treatment comes back to the patient. Here's this list of exercises I want you to do. Yes, doctor. Okay. Well, how many of us do those exercises? Probably very few do the exercises. Um, and I had things that happened to me in my career, and of course, most things you don't feel or pay for till the very end. When all of a sudden you're getting ready to retire, and you're like, "Oh man, oh, everything's hurting on you." Well, it's always been hurting, but you've been sucking it up. You've been powering through whatever to get to where you need to get to in your career or whatever to accomplish the mission. But no, I think once I went when I was yeah, I think I got good care from the PCMs and the folks in family practice, and I think I never heard anything back from anybody in med group say, "Hey, why wow, we heard about what you did." Um, but I think they appreciated seeing leadership in that side of the clinic. So otherwise, everybody was over there, going to the special doctor, and I had no business going to the special doctor. I wasn't on flying status. I don't need that perk. And I did get a perk one time when we were PCSing out of Lodge's Field, and I called LRS to make my appointment for my TMO briefing and coordination, my pickup of household goods and all that. And they said, "Okay, we'll come over to your office, Chief." And blah 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 blah. I said, "No, you don't have to come to my office. I'll come over to you guys." "No, no, we come to you." I said, "No, no, no, I don't." "Sir, we really, if you came over here to our office, we'd be in trouble for." "Okay, all right, I got it." So the airman came over to my office in the comm squadron to give me my TMO briefing and schedule everything. "Okay, I got it. That's your guys' practice and thing, but I don't need that. I really don't need that. I appreciate. I would come over to see you guys. Otherwise, I would probably never be in your office." And I think, again, the less you see as a leader, you know, the more it reinforces, there's a lot of stereotypes that we have in the service and a lot of, negative things that go on that I just never saw that because I didn't get out. I didn't see things. Too many leaders, I think, always go through the same door of the squadron. They go to their office. When's the last time you walked down that hallway? When's the last time you used the other bathroom in the building? The more you get out, the more you see things that need to be looked at. You need to have some attention. It's just you get isolated, you get sucked into your calendar, you get all this kind of stuff. Again, when I was at Fort Meade, another funny story, I was doing the chief induction ceremony. So I organized the whole thing. We sold the tickets and all that, and I was in the agency, so I printed off all the little name cards for the tables to go on
Mhm.
the tables, right? I didn't pay attention. I just hit print, print. Well, apparently I printed like even pages only or odd pages only. So I only printed half of the name cards. So I get to the club at Fort Meade and I had and I'm folding them up and I'm going around putting them. I'm like, oh man, I'm missing half the name cards. And one of the name cards I was missing was for the Brigadier General, who was the commander of the Central Security Service, the military side of the NSA. Randy Fullhart, I remember his name. And I'm like missing his card, missing the general's card, the highest ranking person here. No, man. So I'm I was there early, of course, and actually the general was one of the first people to walk through the door. He was not the typical leader that arrives, 5 minutes before the event and goes right to his table. He was a very personable guy, General Randy Fullhart. So he come in, I greeted him. I'd met him before because he'd come to the schoolhouse where I was at to do some tours. He recognized me, and I told him what happened. He laughed. He goes, "What, do I still get to eat?" I said, "Yes, sir, you should get to eat." He "Chief, don't worry about it. It's a name card. No big deal." I said, "Okay, thank you, sir." And but I mean, he could have been the exact opposite too. And
Mhm.
I've met officers that would have been the exact opposite. But I think he was a great human being as well as a great officer. And he was actually an F-15 pilot by trade. So all the stereotypes we have about pilots maybe is not necessarily true as far as ego and all that goes.
All right. All right. You mentioned your son. So you raised your son and then he grew up to join the United States Air Force. So I'm going to ask you, so what is your advice for someone who is looking for more balance in their life? So more of like a work-life harmony.
Sure. I liked how you said work-life harmony. You said balance at first. Because I think that was one of the misnomers is that, well, balance is 50-50.
Mhm.
You're always going to be in balance. You're not. There's going to be times where you're going to be nearly 100% in one direction at work, as an example. And there are times when we have to do that. Very short times. You cannot be XYZ to the wall 100% of the time for a long period. It's just not sustainable. And unfortunately, we've got some career fields out there that have this inherent mindset that that's the way it's going to be all the time. We're always working 12s. We're always doing this all because that's what we are. That's who we are. Hooah, 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 or whatever you want to cheer after that. And that's not sustainable. There's going to be a time when it's going to be nearly 100% in the other direction. When you're on leave, um, being an older person, when I went on leave, even as a chief, I was on leave. I was on leave. Unless the siren went off and bombs are falling, don't call me on leave.
Mhm.
Nothing is that important unless it's life or death. But we got to this point now, thanks to things like this, where you're on duty 24/7 and you're home and you're expected to check your email and things. I'm not saying I didn't work at home. I did. I would take the annual awards packages home with me and I would grade them, over the evening. But I'd kick my feet up, I'd be relaxed and I'd look over some 1206s. And I got to the point as well, just out of experience, if I got 25 1206s to look at, I can whittle that down to five right away, top five, just how they are written and or what's in there, the meat and stuff. So now I'm only looking at five, and I'm looking at three. I'm down to one before I know it. Um, And I mean, we got to the point though where now with the cell phones and stuff, where people are expected to be available 24/7. And so, okay, available for emergencies. I got it. When I was at Keesler as a master sergeant, I got a call one night from our DO, it was a major. And, caller, I think caller ID was a thing then, but you had to pay for the option. So
Mm.
you may have gotten, otherwise you answered every phone call. Imagine that. Answering every time the phone rang, you answered it. There was no call screening, right? So the phone rang, I answered, it was the major. Oh, Sergeant Odd. He says, "Do you know when Airman so-and-so started school?" Got 250 students on board, sir. No, I don't remember why or when he started school. Is it an emergency? Oh, no, I'm just working on this report. And I was wondering, I said, well, I'll look it up first thing in the morning when I get in, sir. Okay, I appreciate that. Hung up. And I thought, what an idiot. Calling me at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. When did Airman so-and-so start school? Jeez, and it wasn't important. Well, I thought you might know off the top of your head. So, no, I don't know off the top of my head, sir. And the next day I go into work and I told my boss that. The same senior master sergeant who knew about my thing with the projector.
Mhm.
And he says, he just started smiling and he goes, "I give you some advice, KO." Said, "Yeah, okay, what is it?" "Caller ID.
Yeah.
Pay for the," that was like $2 a month, whatever it was back then. So I got caller ID. And, oh yeah, he's calling. I'm not answering. If it's really important, you're gonna leave a voice. You're gonna leave a message on the answer machine, right? Back when we had answer machines before we had voicemail. Didn't leave a message, so it wasn't that important then. Okay. Tomorrow morning there'll be an email in my inbox, maybe, or just something that no. But what was the original question? I forgot. Something about joining the Air Force, or I don't know.
Um, what advice do you have in regards to work-life harmony?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You did your time, you raised your son, and
Yeah, got to keep it in perspective. Not everything is an emergency. And I've heard some great things from people that did the exact same explanation. And I heard things from leadership that I'm just like, oh my God, that was the worst advice I ever heard in my life. You go to a banquet, whatever banquet it is, Air Force banquet, you hear a guest speaker, maybe it resonates for a minute or two, then I even forgot who it was spoke at the banquet last week. You don't remember these things, but a few of them you do remember for good. One I remember for bad. He was a '06, the son of a chief, and he was the speaker at a chief induction. And twice a commander, squadron commander once, and group commander once. So he did 4 years of command duty, not back to back, of course, but he did a total of 4 years. And he was talking about being there for your airmen. So that's a good message. You got to be there for your airmen. Got it. In my 2 years of command, I never took leave. In my 2 years of group command, I never took leave. I was always there for my airmen. I'm just like, that is the worst advice I have ever heard in my life. For one, you're not allowing your vice and your deputy to grow. You're not allowing your squadron commanders to grow because you're always there. Let's see what the boss wants us to do about this. It's like, wow. And I just sat there going, oh my God, I can't believe this is a good thing he did. Being Air Force Airman, I was always didn't take leave for 2 years. I'm like, what a message of what not to do you're sending out here. And say, oh my God, I just like, I was blown away. I could
you
not
had
believe
all those
he
decisions,
did that. And then he said that as a good thing. It's like, oh my gosh, that was terrible.
making all those decisions and never taking time for yourself to
No,
recharge.
or his wife or his family. Oh yeah, I'm always working.
Mhm. All right, Chief, we are coming towards the end.
Yeah,
So do you have any last parting words or advice that you would like to give to the listeners?
sure. Whatever situation you're in, whatever you encounter, whatever it is, personal life, professional life, military life, be a good person. Hold the door for somebody. Say please. Say thank you. Be nice, make things better than when you found them. You're not going to solve every problem. I guarantee you're not going to solve every problem. You're going to have successes. You're going to have failures. Just try to be the best person you can be and make a positive impact on the community and those around you.
Thank you so much for your time. And I really appreciate you being here. So I'm going to end that.